What's up, guys? This is Jimmy with Hifly Fitness here for interview number 2 with Bryce Lewis, and we'll be talking about DUP training, daily undulating periodization, and how to utilize the RPE scale. When is it appropriate to utilize the RPE scale, and basically the different kind of intermediate-ish powerlifting methods that Bryce knows about, and why specifically Bryce has changed from RPE training to a daily undulating periodization type style. So Bryce, if you want to go and talk about it, why did you start utilizing the RPE scale, and why is it beneficial specifically for more of an intermediate athlete?
Cool. So as I recall, my training, I was doing a West Side method of training. So West Side applied to raw lifters. So I was lifting 4 times a week, a heavy lower, a heavy upper session, and a lighter lower, a lighter upper. You know, we can use the words max effort and speed strength or speed work or something like that. But that's roughly the structure of it. And as far as the max effort work, it was essentially a 90% 2x2, and then the next week you try to set a new 2-rep max and do that for quite a while. So that was working extremely well for a long time, and I'm generally of the mindset if something is working for you, there's absolutely no reason to switch. You know, even if the fad is to do something else or to have a different training methodology, if what you're doing is working, there's no reason to change. So what I was doing was working and working very well. When it stops, we try to figure out methods, try to figure out why it's not working, what do we need to change, and ultimately a lot of these things boil down to what's your volume, what's your frequency, are you getting practice on the movements, and these things that are really at the heart of a lot of the changes in programming in people's progress. So we switched to a different cycling of the maxes. So work on squats for 3 weeks, deadlifts for 2, squats for 3 again, and go forward. But even at a point, I was kind of hitting a wall where just the intensity was too high to progress. So at that point, I had been doing some research on autoregulation. Eric was pretty familiar with autoregulation. Eric Helms from 3D Muscle Journey. And at that point, we decided to try it out as a method of, just allowing me to get additional volume and not hit that training wall. And that's one of the nice things about autoregulation. And I'll probably have to back up and explain exactly what autoregulation is in a minute. But that's one of the nice things, is that your load on the specific day and your work in total is determined by how you're feeling that day and how you are capable of performing. So autoregulation is something that exists in many programs. It can be coach-driven, it can be athlete-driven, but specifically the modern version of autoregulation that we're talking about has to do with the RPE scale, which stands for rate of perceived exertion, which is a scale of 1 to 10, which rates how hard a set was for you subjectively. So a 9 RPE generally could mean that you had 1 rep left in the tank by the time you finished the set. A 10 means that you literally could not do any more weight or any more reps. So if you were in a competition and you hit a PR on your 3rd attempt and you just ground it out and there was nothing left in you, we'd call that an RPE 10. So essentially everything below that is backwards from that. We can apply some other concepts to that allow you to regulate the number of sets and the total workload, but RPE is really the main thing that we'll talk about here. It's a great concept and it covers a lot, and a lot of athletes thrive in it. It will take you, if you're new to it, quite a while to get efficient with rating the RPE for your own sets. I was finding early on that I was rating the RPE for my sets a lot lower than it actually was. So for instance, my 8.5s were probably 9s or 9.5s. So it's the kind of thing that can take you anywhere from 6 months to 1 year. And to give credit where credit is due, by the way, this system was designed and popularized by Michael Tuchscherer, who is a coach and an extremely accomplished athlete in his own right. But we're talking about RPE and how it's useful. So yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about auto-regulating a system is that you can come in on a given day and work with exactly what you have on that day. Maybe you didn't get great enough sleep the night before, or maybe, you know, you were studying, or, you know, any one of a number of concerns. You're a little bit more fatigued from your last session because you went hard or something.
Right.
You're able to work with what you have on the specific day. So it allows you ways to make the most of what you've got on that day. So to give an example, let's say that I'm supposed to do a triple for my squats at an RPE of 9. You know, maybe last week I got tons of rest, I did great, and I was able to hit 440, you know, at an RPE 9. And that was all I had that day. Maybe this day I'm coming in, I don't really have a lot because, you know, like the examples I said before, I didn't get sleep. I've had a few tough sessions. I'm feeling a little bit beat up. Maybe I come in, I can only hit 400 for a triple. But today I'm still getting the most possible that I could have possibly lifted, given the fact that what we want is a triple at an RPE 9. So it allows you to work with what you're capable of for a specific day.
Right.
It was great. Working for quite a while, I felt like I built up a pretty good work capacity, especially on the bench press. I made quite a lot of progress. But what I was finding was that it was tough for me to gauge not only what the RPE was when it came to different rep ranges. The lower the rep range is, kind of the easier it is to tell what the RPE is. But the higher the reps, the more difficult it is. Not to mention a few other concerns that Eric Helms is actually, I think, working on for part of his PhD. But I was finding that using fatigue percents to determine the total number of sets that I was working with even made it so that my volume was so variable on a weekly basis that it was a little bit harder to keep track of what was going on. And I was finding that I was a little bit fatigued and just not making the progress that I wanted. So I didn't necessarily say that, hey, I want to switch to a DUP program. What I said is, you know, coach, I just want you to give me a strict sets, reps, and load on the bar, even if, you know, you auto-regulate it yourself or you regulate the load, so that I can just go in there with a game plan and just say, you know, look at a piece of paper and say, okay, this is what I have to do today. Did I do it? Yes, great, check. You know, and as Eric said, coach is happy. If I didn't do it, no good, coach is not happy. You know, just make it easier for me and make me in the weight room less of a coach and just more of an athlete. You know, in RPE, you have to simultaneously be a little bit of a coach in the weight room, because after every single set, you have to ask yourself, okay, what was the RPE? How did I rate it? And you can second guess yourself a little bit. You can convince yourself that the RPE was either lower or higher, depending on what type of athlete you are psychologically. You know, I have athletes that I coach now that rated the RPE higher than it was so that they could kind of get away with less work. And then I have other athletes that rated the RPE lower so they could do more work because they're work junkies. So we have all kinds of different cases, and you have to know what that is. So it's a little bit more of a complicated picture.
Right.
It can be an extremely effective system. I'm not knocking the system as a whole. I know plenty of athletes who thrive on it. I personally program auto-regulated systems for a lot of athletes myself, but it can have some drawbacks for specific athletes, and I think that it would be foolish to ignore those.
Right, and I think a lot of people, I mean, myself included, I did it throughout the summer for about 4 months, and I really don't like to program hop, but everything that you talked about, I just can't handle being a coach every single time I go in the gym, because, you know, once you're tired, you just want to get in and get out, and thinking about what you have to do to get in and get out while, you know, auto-regulating everything, like you said,
Sure.
is really difficult. So then, what is like daily undulating periodization, or DUP, and
Cool.
how do you implement that now?
Awesome. So let me just say that before I get to DUP, that auto-regulation is wide and varied, and that for someone like you, you may want to try APRE, which is auto-regulated progressive resistance exercises. And that's essentially using your performance on one or more movements per week to dictate the loads on the next week. So you kind of have fixed loads through most of the week, but let's say you hit a plus set on your third set and try to hit as many reps as possible, or up to an RPE 9 or 9.5 or something, and then use your performance from that to dictate the loads for next week. So it's a little bit less of a cerebral approach, and that's kind of an intermediate step there.
Right.
And there's a lot of research to dictate that that's an extremely effective approach too. And you know, all these all these programming methodologies that we're discussing so far can be interlaced. We can have an undulating program with APRE. We can have an undulating program using the Rpe scale or auto-regulated. But daily undulating periodization is very straightforward. Just a little bit of a background. It's existed for quite a long time, but popularized now by Mike Zordos, who's an excellent professor and researcher at FAU, and a few people who have learned some of those concepts, Ben Esgro, Lane Norton. We see it gaining a lot of popularity right now. But essentially all it means is that we're performing different sets, reps, and loads on different days of the week for exercises. Plain and simple. So what's not DUP? What's not DUP is performing the squat for 3x6, day 1, day 2, and day 3. So nothing changes there. You're just doing 3x6. When we say that we're undulating something, all we're saying is that maybe on day 1 we're doing 3x10. Maybe on day 2 we're doing 8x2. Maybe on day 3 we're doing 5x5. So generally we decide what rep and set combinations we do based off of specific goals. So in the literature, it's a quote-unquote hypertrophy day, a quote-unquote speed strength or power day, and a quote-unquote strength day, or something like that, something to that effect. And so we can work with different intensities, different rep and set combinations depending on the athlete. And that's pretty much it. So as I made the change myself from an RPE system to a daily undulating periodization, we just increased the frequency for me personally. This is my own goal, it's not anyone else, from 3 times a week squatting to 4 times a week squatting so that I could get more practice with the movement. We also put in a variation, so I was performing the high bar squat and the low bar squat and the conventional deadlift and the sumo deadlift to test out these other variations. And then, just design an 8-week program to peak an athlete over 8 weeks and then assess at the end of that time if it worked, if it didn't. And I think that setting up programming over smaller chunks of time is a good idea, anywhere from 4 to 16 weeks or something in that range. And then, being the coach and the athlete or working with a coach